Hi, I'm Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Writer to Writer Interviews. I'm Casey Bell, your host, and today's guests are Leah Lindeman, who is a historical fiction writer from Canada, and Robert Ottone, a horror fiction writer from New York. Let's get started.
So it's really nice to meet you, Robert.
Nice to meet you.
I don't know too many horror authors, but I'm intrigued by the genre. I know mostly traditional horror, so that would be more along the lines of Dracula, maybe Frankenstein. So how would you say your horror is different from, let's say, the traditional kind that maybe, that genre?
Yeah, the Gothic tradition definitely influences everything. Especially now, there's a huge resurgence in the Gothic tradition in modern horror literature. So I think that definitely influences my work as well, especially concepts related to, when you look at Frankenstein, right? Frankenstein's the fear of creation, right? It's about the idea of science run amok, the fear of creation, and that's still in everything that we look at. You could look at something like The Blob, that's essentially fear of creation, or you look at something like really anything. Get Out. Get Out's a good example of the fear of creation. That's making a tremendous psychological scientific discovery and twisting it and making it terrible. So in that case, it's the same kind of thing. So I would say the Gothic tradition is alive and well, and definitely in my work for sure.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
What about your journey into becoming a horror author? How did that transpire for you? Was it because of particular authors that you read, or is it just because you're drawn to that naturally? What would you say?
I didn't grow up reading a lot of horror. I grew up reading a lot of satire and a lot of sort of scathing, I guess, comedy in some ways. Bret Easton Ellis and Jay McInerney, guys like that. And but I had always watched horror and I had always loved horror. So when I wanted to start writing, I had written for a long time. I had the Disney fellowships in screenwriting for a year and a half, and I had had some plays performed and stuff like that, which was a lot of fun. But then moving into short story work, I just found myself, well, what's the best way to make commentary about society? And almost always it's horror. Night of the Living Dead is about, the struggles of oppressed people. Dawn of the Dead is about the revenge of the oppressed. So you could say a lot about through the lens of horror that you can't really in some other genre. So I would say that's why. I think that's why I go with horror, because a lot of the things that I write are really about something else.
And does satire ever kind of come into that? Because you said that you started off with satire, reading a lot of that. So does that ever play into your horror as well?
It does, yeah. In my novella, Her Infernal Name, there's a lot of satire about social media and influencer culture and stuff like that.
Okay, very cool. And I also looked at your Goodreads profile, and in answer to the question, what gets you inspired, you said that meeting different people brings you down this weird path. So I was wondering, I'm curious about the psychology of that. Can you kind of bring us down that weird path? Like, give us an example of what does that look like for you?
Sure. Meeting people is wonderful. I've always been very sociable, and you put me in a room with a bunch of strangers and I'm going to come out with phone numbers and emails and friendships. And that's just how I always have been. My dad raised me like that. But as I've gotten older, I'm able to really zero in on certain personality traits in people, good and bad, mostly good. And there's always like weird little tics or little things you'll notice in the way people speak. Sometimes there's a pattern or a verbal crutch that they will rely on. And then if you really think about that verbal crutch, you could find the crux of who that person is. It's really weird. I don't know why I do it, but it helps with characterization.
You kind of pick out the oddities then in people that you see.
Yeah, and sometimes those oddities are really quite beautiful, in the sense that something that could be very endearing. So I'm a teacher and I work with adults, for example. So one of my students, and I work with students who are not from the United States. Most of my students are from China or Iran or Korea. And one of my students, she's this lovely, lovely, super sweet woman. She always starts her answers with yes. So even if the answer is not yes or no, she's always like yes, and then she goes from there, almost as a way to like affirm her stance in something, which I really admire. So I think it's really endearing and very sweet of her that she's trying to build her confidence in speech through being assertive and affirmative in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and sorry, you said these students, what do you teach exactly?
I teach English as a new language.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I love it. Working with ENL students, that's what it's called here. ENL students is just, it's such a true honor and such a pleasure. And I've never had more hardworking students in my entire career.
Wow. And is teaching your background?
It is, yeah. I have my master's in education. I'm working on another master's that's also in education, and I'm working on an MFA right now as well. So 2 masters to go with my other masters.
Wow. Okay, so it really coincides with your writing then.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I know that question was not one of my original questions. I just had to ask. Wow, that's really amazing. And I guess because of COVID, I mean, it works out that you still have this, streaming income coming in. So
Yeah, not too bad.
yeah, that's great. And I wanted to also ask if you could sit down with any dead or alive author, who would it be, and why would you want to talk?
Okay. I'll give one a live one first, because that won't be as interesting. Stephen King. I know it's kind of a cliche, but he's literally the most successful writer that's ever walked the face of the earth. So I think it's probably important to maybe learn something from him. But in terms of people who have passed away, this is more to make up a regret that I have. The guy who wrote The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty,
Okay.
he passed away not super long ago. And the tragedy of that is I had his phone number and his email for 2 years before he passed away. And I
No
never
way.
called him. Yeah, I never took advantage of it. And then he died. So I think he's the one that I would want to spend the most time with of authors that have passed away, for sure.
Can I ask why you didn't capitalize on that information?
Fear. I think I was afraid. Maybe imposter syndrome a little bit, because he was also a screenwriter and a filmmaker, and the movies that he made were brilliant, and his writing is brilliant. And he just seemed like a real force of nature. So I think I was intimidated by that. But now I wouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how, in certain places of our lives, we don't have the confidence to take steps. But then, as you said, 2-3 years later, you've grown in that way. But then sometimes the timing is just too late, which is unfortunate. But at least you can take satisfaction that you've grown in that way, and you could say, yes, I would be ready if another opportunity like that came along.
Very true, yeah. And I still have the email with his stuff in it. And every once in a while, I open up that email and look, and like, there's his phone number, there's his email, and then I just save it. I put it back in my writing folder, and that's that.
Do you think you're going to keep it forever, or do you think at one point you're just going to be like, okay, I'm good?
That's a really cool question. No, I'll keep it forever. As always, kind of a
Why?
reminder. I think as a reminder to, don't die wondering.
Yeah.
To really have no regrets.
I like that.
Yeah.
Very insightful. And my last question is about your Spooky House Press.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you decide, so obviously you're an author and you have other stuff going on, your job. What made you jump into putting up a press where you would also publish other people's work and work with other people? What was the intention behind that?
I wanted to give other authors an opportunity. There's only so many big publishing companies. There's literally 3 or 4. They call them the big 5, but really Penguin and Random House are the same. So it's not like they're different. So I don't know. I just really wanted to give back in some way, because I feel like I've been very lucky to, place the stories that I've placed in anthologies and work with the editors that I've worked with, and putting out my books and stuff has been wonderful. So I wanted to do that with other authors as well. And originally we were just going to be science fiction and horror, but there's so many beautiful opportunities that we've been given from other authors sending us their work that we're going to be spinning off and doing other things. We actually have a really beautiful comedy art book coming out in 2021 that I'm really, really excited about. We don't have a title yet, but the contracts were just signed about a week ago with the artist, and she's just brilliantly funny. She's out of Michigan. And
wow.
yeah, I'm super excited about that. And the other collection that we published by Michael Jess Alexander has actually won 2 small press awards already. So we're very proud of that. And he is very, very much so deserving. So finding people like that, for example, that's a tough duo to beat in my eyes, because one is so brilliantly funny and she's an amazing artist, and the other is just such a stellar horror writer. So Spooky House Press for me is just my way of sort of giving back while also having fun and giving people who I think deserve a voice to put their material out.
And I guess you have a large pool of resources that you're able to give them and that they can choose from and kind of go on their journey that way.
Yeah, we're super, super inclusive, and I'm very, almost to a detriment maybe, I am super transparent. I like to keep everybody in the loop. So like with Michael, for example, the guy who's won the 2 awards, every decision that I made, I was like, hey, I'm doing this. If you disagree with it, tell me. And he was like, hey man, it's all good. Whatever you want to do, which I appreciate that. But I also, if I were in his place, I would want to know what was going on. I'm not like a micromanager or anything, but I think it's nice to keep people in the loop. So yeah, we give them a lot of opportunity. We have a really nice pool of cover artists, and my partner in the endeavor is my editor as well, and he's a professional editor for a publishing company here in New York. So
nice.
He's got that. Yeah, he's got that background, which is always handy. He is so strict with what he wants to publish. He's always is, he's like, you make the decision, and it's always his like intensely critical eye that I'm wary of. But he's a taskmaster. I love it.
Wow.
He's bad cop while I try to be good cop.
There you go. Well, I guess you need someone on the other side who pushes a little bit more than you do.
That's true.
But I think it's great, though, that you keep people in the loop, because I know for me, when I was looking at traditional publishing and self-publishing, that was for me a big factor. It's like, you would have to take all that time to find someone who has a vision and who, I guess, respects you enough to be like, well, what do you think if we do it this way? And really keep you in the loop. So I think that's a really great quality to have.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And there's so many wonderful small presses, and I would like to, put Spooky House Press at that point someday. It's going to take a lot more time and effort. And right now with like all of the schoolwork, I'm also learning French. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm learning French.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, it's so difficult. I love it. My average is 91 right now in the class. I'll take it as long as it's above an 80. I don't care.
Yeah.
But I'm learning French. I'm going to be taking Italian, and then I'm going to be doing American Sign Language all within the next 6 months. So,
are you taking online classes for these, or are you doing?
Yeah, it's all online through some local universities here
Nice.
in New York. So it's a lot. So, but once all that's over, I would like to try to publish at least 2, maybe 3 authors a year in Spooky House. Whether it's a short collection or an art book or even a feature-length novel. We were actually sent 3 novels to really consider, and I feel bad. And again, this is an example of my transparency. I reached out to these 2 gentlemen, or 3 gentlemen rather, and I was like, hey, probably not going to get to these until Christmas break or after Christmas. I hope that's all right. And they were like, hey, you get to it when you can. You don't even have to tell us that. But I was like, oh, all right.
No, that's great.
Yeah. And I'm also very conscious of contracts and what we pay authors and whatnot, because obviously I can't be like, here's 6 figures, we're going to publish your book. Yeah. But so far so good. It's funny, in working with the artist, for the art book, we were talking about contracts and stuff, and she was like, "Wow, I really wanted to haggle and do counter offers and stuff with you, but that what you just said is literally what I was thinking." So I was like, "Oh, all right, mission accomplished."
There you go. Less work for both of you too.
Oh, thank God. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so happy that we're putting out her book. She is so amazingly funny. Her name is Alexis Macaluso. Brilliant, brilliantly funny woman.
That's amazing. Well, I wish you all the best in your endeavors with Spooky House and your writing and whatever future projects are coming up for you. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, don't go anywhere now. We are just getting started. We'll be back after this message.
Coming September 30th from Spooky House Press. Her Infernal Name and Other Nightmares by Robert P. Ottone. 18 tales of horror and the supernatural to keep you awake at night.
On the 5th floor, two people stumbled into the elevator. Two men, one holding the other up. Behind them, in the quick glimpse Henry caught down the corridor, three figures lurched toward the elevator, a buzz of sound around them.
When the light exploded from above her, shaking the canopy of leaves, Kelly's eyes went wide. The light enveloped her, and she began floating upward, toward the light. She looked over toward Resting Hollow, the lights of the town twinkling in the night. When she looked skyward, all she saw was light. Bathed in the light of the ship, which hummed louder and louder as she floated closer and closer, Kelly shut her eyes and waited.
Bloody, weapon drawn, opened the trunk of the car, and inside was the 3-week-old, rotted corpse of the driver's grandmother. Skin had bloated and swelled with fluid, and her teeth were missing.
Rob Ottone is a talented writer with a cinematic imagination and a fine ear for dialogue. His dark stories have charm, originality, and an understated humor, and his dialogue is just about word perfect. Her Infernal Name and Other Nightmares by Robert P. Ottone. Available September 30th. Get it before it gets you.
So I was also looking at your website, which is really quite elegant, actually. I'm always, I admire when I see an author's website, and it's always clean and elegant, and there's a wealth of information without too much information, and I can appreciate that. So my first question for you is, how do you define Canadiana?
Canadiana. So basically do you mean Canadiana in terms of my books or just in general Canadiana?
How about in terms of your books first and then in general?
Sure. So Canadiana in terms of my books is, I'll give you a kind of quick snapshot of where I'm going with my series. In my series, there's 13 books because there's 13 provinces or territories in Canada, and each book is set in a certain historical time period. So basically celebrating the history of Canada. Because growing up, and just, I guess, as general knowledge, everybody thinks Canadian history is boring compared to American history, because American history is so dramatic, and you have this war and this going on. And I know because I actually studied American history for high school. But for Canadian history, it's like, yeah, we have some important historical figures, World War I, World War II, and you get a very, general overview, but nothing very specific. And so that really just kind of drew me into, well, I'm sure we have something. And the more I dug, the more I realized that we actually do have a lot of interesting history, timepiece, let's say, in the whole general Canadian history. So yeah, Canadiana, in terms of my books, that's what it'd be, specifically to its history and to the people and to the culture. And then just in general, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's these like lumberjack flannel blankets, or you have like the checkered black and red look,
Yeah.
right? That would be kind of viewed as Canadiana. We even have like our own Canadian brand where you can get stuff from Walmart, and it has like that kind of
That's awesome.
checkered look, or the gray and the red Canadian. So beavers, maple syrup, maple trees. So any of those things, you just, or igloos, or winter, you just kind of think Canadiana, basically. But
That's awesome.
those don't really make too much of an appearance in my book since they're more historical, but.
Fair enough. I love that. So now when I see those things, I'm going to think that's just pure Canadiana right there.
Exactly.
I love that. I find it interesting that you studied American history in school and stuff. Weird. Yeah, we are pretty dramatic, right? I guess America is some, I mean, we just had a monster ousted from the White House, so that's pretty dramatic in and of itself, right? So that's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting. I only studied American history not because I actually was homeschooled for high school, and we used an American curriculum, and that's why I know all about American history, but Canadian history is very glossed over. So I was like, oh, I need to know about my country because I'm very patriotic, which is weird because most Canadians are not patriotic.
Why?
We kind of, I don't know. It's just this weird culture thing. Like, yeah, we're Canadian, but it doesn't seem very special. So I'm not sure why that is. Maybe I should really like dig deep and start asking people questions like that. But
yeah, I find that interesting that Canadians wouldn't be patriotic in that way. Canada was instrumental in winning World War II, so I can't imagine not being. That's so strange to me, but interesting. All right, I think. I know about in terms of Canadian history. I know Simcoe Day. I know is a thing in Canada, and he's quite the hero in Simcoe in Canada, from what I've read. There was a show here. I'm sure it was in Canada too. The show Turn, about the American Revolution. It's about the spy ring here in New York.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, and Simcoe is a character in that, and he is a monster in that show. He's sort of the villain, but then I read the real life thing, and it's like, no, he was quite a good guy. So it's weird, but it ends positive with him. So I was like, okay, at least he got his happy ending, I guess.
Yeah.
But, so has there been, what's the biggest surprise that you've discovered over your time writing? Because I see that you have 2 full-length novels and you have 2 novellas.
That's right.
So what's been the biggest surprise to you over the course of that work?
In terms of writing or discovering the stories?
I guess in terms of, I guess the writing, but also the business of writing as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll go for the writing first. One thing that has really, I guess, intrigued me and kind of kept me going and helped me discover about writing is the writing process of writing a novel every time. See, my first novel took about 6 years to write, in terms of, like writing a first draft and then revisions and then doing editing and then having beta readers read it and more editing and all that. And then all the subsequent books have been about average 2 years, maybe a year and a half. So what I found interesting is once you've done it once, it seems to flow more naturally the subsequent times, but at the same time, every book, because it has its own life and its own characters and it's just its own feel to it, I still get those moments where I'm sitting in front of my screen and I'm like, I'm stumped. I have no clue where this story is going. And you would think that after writing 4 books, you're like, oh yeah, you just, you plow through it and you're good. But still, the story seems to still have a way of manifesting itself in its own time sometimes, and its own way. And just, I guess, how life inspired me. And like it's really, that's the thing I've learned the most about writing, is that how the story has a life of its own. As for the business of writing, I'm always learning something new every day. I'm quite new at this, you could say, because I think I put out my first book in 2017. So it's only been 3 years. But Yeah, definitely the marketing side is always something I'm learning how to capitalize on that, and something I'm a little bit more deficient in. But yeah, I would say mostly that.
I think we all are pretty, when it comes to unless we're like marketing professionals, we're not always good. Like I agree with you. I feel the same way. I literally learn something new about it every day. Like
Yeah.
I'll set something to learn. Okay, today I want to focus on BookBub. Tomorrow I want to focus on BookSprout. Tomorrow I want to focus on this, and then it's always something new. Or like what's the right amount of copy to have in a little tiny clickable ad on, it's yeah. I agree. There's always something, but I wanted to touch on this because when I was looking at your website and I was looking at Goodreads and stuff as well, your book covers are haunting.
Wow. Thank
How
you.
intentional? Yeah. How intentional is that? I mean, they stay with you. They're really quite beautiful.
Well, for the standalone novels, what's interesting is that, again, when I was looking at traditional publishing and self-publishing, one of the things that drew me to self-publishing is if you have a vision, then you can really go with it, right? And it's all yours, and no one can really touch it unless you say so. So that was one of the big draws for me to self-publishing, is that, and I had this exact vision of what I wanted on my cover. And I had the exact look of my character that I wanted. So I actually used one of my friends, it's a friend of a friend. And I was just like, oh, I just need to find someone who has the look. And I scrolled on Facebook and I was like, oh, I know her. She's my friend's friend. And so I just like literally popped out of the blue and say, hey, you want to be a model on my cover? And she said, sure. And the photographer that I got for my 2 standalone novels, she's actually an old school friend and she does photography. She lives like in the Toronto area right now. And she just, I mean, it's a lot of it is her too, just capturing what I want. And yeah, I mean, both those shots we got in the space of 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's all we needed because I just knew. And the first girl, she's like, I'm not a model. I don't know what to do. It was just perfect. And for the second cover, same thing. We kind of did it. That one was a little bit of a fluke though, because we shot it more in the woods because I wanted more of that kind of woodsy, thrillery kind of feel.
Yep.
But then the lighting was kind of going down and we left the woods and then there was this tree right outside the woods. And my friend's like, well, let's try and take a few shots here. And I said, sure. And then we propped it up differently. And then that just turned out to be the shot at the end, which actually both shots were always at the end, but it was great. And then, yeah, my friend just has a great eye for the titles too. Like I give her my font, what I want, and she puts it all together. And so that was that for the standalone novels. And as for the novellas, I did it all on Canva. So, I just looked at the ebook covers that they have, and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go with that, and then just tweaked a few things. But I was just blessed to find ebook covers that went with what I kind of wanted the feel to be. So that's how I went about doing my covers. But I'm glad, yeah.
Oh, they're amazing. I don't want to gush about it, but I thought they were awesome. So thank you. That's great. And Canva, I love that. I made a bookmark in Canva, so I might have to revisit that. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
so.
sure. I use it for all my social media posts and like posters when I do live events. I create everything on Canva and they just send it to my local printer and they print it all up for me. And it's great because they have templates that you can use already. Mm-hmm. And then you just, tweak the colors, maybe change the images, tweak the font, and voila, there you go. You got a really nice poster or bookmark.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I have to play with that more.
And it's very user friendly.
So this is I found it to be user friendly when I was doing the bookmarks. So that's awesome. This is kind of a weird question, I guess. Was there any like backlash at all against using Agnes McVie?
Not so far, which is great. And it's interesting. I looked into kind of if anybody else had written about her.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the book, but it's this graphic novel that just came out, I think, last year, and it was by a local artist. And so I haven't read it yet. I would like to read it, but I just kind of did take a quick peek into a few of the pages inside. Seemed to be very interesting. But yeah, no, I haven't. And I haven't touched the original Legend, which I didn't want to, because that's so well known. And why touch a Legend when it's probably very maybe well loved, or used as a ghost story in that part of the country, right? So I really wanted to touch on, okay, well, how did she get to that point, or what were the origins? Now, I don't touch her origins in Scotland, which the graphic novel seems to do, but more in Canada. And what's interesting is that I had the idea for the sequel before I had the idea for the main book. So I was just doing research on BC, and then I came across that, and I was like, oh, that would be an awesome, idea. But at the same time, I was like, well, I don't want to touch the Legend. I just want to touch beforehand. And I think that would be more of a novella idea. And then from there, I almost backtracked to the main original story, which is Wisps of Gold, and then went into Scathed Bones. So that's kind of how that played out.
That's awesome. I love that. Because when like I said, I was looking at your site and I was looking at the books, I was like, oh, that's pretty creepy. I like that. Being a Canadian serial killer.
Yes.
Now, my final question for you is, do you see expanding beyond Canada? Do you see writing about anything? I know you touched on, the idea of her origins in Scotland. I know that you mentioned that comic book certainly does that. But do you see yourself going anywhere outside of Scotland in the near future or down the line? I'm sorry, Canada, not Scotland.
Yeah, Canada. Definitely. I have ideas for sure for other books, but they actually wouldn't be historical fiction, which is interesting. I feel like the end of the saga would be Canada. So I would do my 13 books with each subsequent novellas, because I like to kind of end on an open ending with all my main standalone books. And then I bring in the novella to clinch it all off. So I would have the 13 main standalones with the 13 novellas. I have an idea for a dystopian novel, which actually came from a very vivid dream that I had. And it was just so clear, the colors, how I felt, that I just woke up and I was like, yep, that's like an opening scene to a dystopian novel. I have no clue what the story is, but I'm sure eventually when, my head is done with Canada, I'll get there. And I do have an idea for a more contemporary literary fiction series, more like a 4-book part. And I've always wanted to try my hand at fantasy, but I've never been inspired like with a story that just came to me. So I don't know if I ever will, but I really enjoy reading the genre. So we'll see, maybe. But already with the 13 books, this is going to take up, I know it's going to take up at least 15 years of my life, because I don't just write. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I've got number 6 on the way.
Oh my God.
So it's, the kids already take up a lot of time, and I also homeschool them as well. So that takes up a lot of my time. And just finding the time to write is a discipline in itself, which I enjoy doing. And I'm really glad that I guess I have that discipline to do so. But yeah, already 15 to 20 years of my life is just going to be Canada. So we'll see what happens. But I know me, I'm going to be writing till the day I die. It's just a passion of mine now that I can't let go.
I love that, writing to the day I die. Congratulations on number 6. My God.
Thank you.
I don't have any. And I still don't have time to write. So I get it.
Well, it's amazing how time fills up so quickly. Like, even if you don't have kids, you have a social life, or you have work, or you know, family, friends, and it's gone. Unless
tomorrow, for example, is a holiday here in the States, and I don't have to go to school, but I've got a million things to do. So it's like I can't enjoy any kind of time off, really. But
actually, we got the same holiday, Remembrance Day. Or do you guys call it Memorial Day?
We call it Veterans Day.
Oh, Veterans Day. That's right. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's Remembrance Day. I actually like the sound of Remembrance Day better. I think that's more all-encompassing than Veterans Day, because it's worth remembering, medical personnel and the people who died in wars as well that were innocent and stuff. So I think that's kind of a nice way to put that. That is all. What's that?
A very Canadian aspect of that is the poppy. Do you guys celebrate with poppies?
No.
Okay, so Canadiana thing, we wear poppies on our jackets, and everybody gets them, and that's just a way to remember.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We do that for Memorial Day.
Do we?
Yeah.
Well,
we don't actually wear them, but they give them out for Memorial Day.
Wow, I've never gotten a poppy for Memorial Day.
They usually have them, the post office, there's usually a veteran outside giving them out. Well, if you donate money to the Veterans Fund, they give you a poppy.
Yeah, wow. You can even donate like $1 or $2 here. I don't know what it is down in the States, but it's actually also based on a very famous Canadian poem called In Flanders Fields. And it's all about in Flanders Fields, the poppies grow between the crosses row on row. And then it continues. It's just about, the graves in a field of poppies. And so very well recited here. And that's where we get the whole poppies from. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love this. I'm learning so much. All I do, not all I knew, but my all-time favorite wrestler is Canadian, and I just, other than that, no, I knew, a fair amount. But no, I love that. I like learning the intricacies of holidays and stuff like that. I think that's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Something to talk about with my students now.
There you go. And you can look up In Flanders Fields, very popular here. So
yeah, I think that would be nice. Some of them love poetry, some of them hate poetry.
Okay.
I don't like teaching poetry personally, but I do recognize and appreciate the merits of it. But yeah, awesome.
We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Almost 2 years after outwitting her blackmailer and her father's murderer, and discovering her father's gold vein, Rosewood returns to the Cariboo region in BC to reunite with her fiancé Dave and prepare for her wedding. However, missing persons and evil practices append her happy return. Can she and Dave work together after so much time apart to catch a serial killer? Scathed Bones by Leah Lindeman. Go to leahlindeman.com.
Just tell me, because I always want to know, for people who ask me about publishing, who did you use to publish your books? And I know you said Spooky House Press, but prior to that, what did you use to publish your book? And were you satisfied with them? Would you suggest them to someone?
I've always done a combination of Ingram Spark and Amazon.
Okay.
And I'm more happy with Ingram Spark's ability to do a pre-order, but their customer service is not as great as Amazon's.
Okay.
And they're not as transparent with their numbers. Amazon's very transparent with their numbers.
And what about you, Leah?
Same here, self-publishing. I wanted, all the controls, so that's what I did. Same thing, Amazon, I am working on putting everything up on Ingram Spark. And as for ebooks, I use Draft to Digital. And that has all the ebook platforms on there. So Barnes & Noble, Kobo, even the library subscription services.
What is that again?
Live. It's Draft to Digital.
DRAFT?
So Draft, and then the number 2, and then digital.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, .com. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is all for today's episode of Writer's Writer Interviews. I would like to thank our guests, Leah Lindeman and Robert Ottone, and I thank you for watching. Have yourself a great day.